Well, welcome everyone. Ooh, a little bit of audio feedback there. Hopefully everyone's having a good Ignite so far. So just to get an idea of who's in the room here, how many of you work in education in some way? Oh, great. A lot of you. How many of you are just interested in what OneNote is doing in education? Okay, all of you. Great. So just to give you a little bit of context, I've been on the OneNote team for about a year now. And basically, I was looking at all of OneNote marketing for a long time. And then this past fall, there was a change. And down from the top, Satya Nadella, Chi Lu, down to our GM, Aran Megiddo, and OneNote, basically said, OneNote needs to go after education. That it's a perfect application for education. And of course, teachers and students have been saying this for years. And we finally realized it. And what we've seen over the last 8 or 9 months is amazing things happening across the globe with regards to OneNote and education. So just to start off, for those of you who don't know, this week is actually Teacher Appreciation Week here in the US. So how many teachers do I have in the room? Nice, a few of you. Okay, well, I want all those teachers to stand up. I want them to stand up, and we're all going to thank them for all the things that they've done. Awesome. Well, and I have with me in the room a good friend who's going to tell me a little bit, and all of you, a little bit about why he appreciates teachers, and maybe one teacher in particular. Scott, where are you? Are you over here? Want to go to the mic? Tell me a little bit about your experience with your teacher.
Hey everyone, my name's Scott Shapiro. I'm actually also new to the OneNote team, so thanks to everyone for coming out today, and thanks Ari. So I want to take a moment to say thank you to Mrs. Wallasoff, an elementary school teacher of mine. Growing up, I was a real rambunctious kid. I'm sure you guys can relate to that idea. Principal's office all the time, getting in trouble. And finally, I had a teacher kind of say, I think this is a kid who's not just a case of the boys will be boys, but might have a little bit of issues. And she really encouraged me, go to the doctor, kind of look into this. Found out I had ADHD, and from there, life really got a lot better for me. So to that, Ms. Wallasoff, I say a major thank you for changing my life, helping me to get here with Microsoft now and hopefully change others. And in addition, a quick shout out to my older sister as a teacher and my cousin. So thank you to them, and thank you to my great teacher, Ms. Wallasoff, and thank you to all the teachers here in the room and those that impact students every day.
Thanks a lot, Scott. Thank you so much for sharing that, Scott. So I wanted to kind of kick it off that way because really when we talk about OneNote, we talk about what it's doing for education, specifically what it's doing for educators and their students. And so the context for most of my presentation is going to be around, how is OneNote being built and developed and implemented specifically with educators and students in mind. And so last night I did a little bit of sketching about what that might look like, why I really appreciate my teachers. No, I'm just kidding. This is actually a sketch note done by a guy who we have working in the OneNote booth. But if you want to see some cool sketch notes and some of the potential for using handwriting in OneNote, check out the OneNote booth, and you'll be able to see some of the great things that are possible now across devices, actually, not only on a Surface, but also on Android and iOS devices. So today, I'm going to start off just with the context of, what are some of the issues that we see students having with learning? What do we see some issues with educators who are trying to, of course, teach those students? And then how is OneNote seeking to solve them? And then really talk about, what is OneNote in education? What are the big investment areas? What are some of the product developments that we've done over the past 8 months that really impact education? And then some of the innovation that we've been seeing because of that investment in education. So how many of you have heard of the OneNote Class Notebook? Okay, a good number of you, about a fourth. How about the OneNote Staff Notebook? Okay, a few of you as well. It's a little bit newer. Okay, so we'll talk through a little bit of those and show you what those look like and kind of the potential for those tools in education. And then we'll talk a little bit about the future and make sure we leave a little bit of time for questions at the end. Throughout the session, I will have a OneNote notebook that you guys can jump back to. And I've shared it with all of you, so that's an edit link. So if you want to just grab a picture of that, you can ask questions. I have a nice little table in there if you want to share any stories about teachers who you appreciate, and maybe we'll retweet your information in there. So feel free to put it in that OneNote notebook, and we will come back to that at the end. Everyone got it? Okay. One more second. So when we think about the students, and at the end of the day, it's all about the students, there's always that question of, okay, from an IT level, what do we give the students? What will make them be most productive? And of course, on the right-hand side, you have paper, which is the typical thing that most students will use, right? But more and more, you're seeing students move over to the left, which is with tablets, or in the middle with a PC, and most of their learning is taking place on those devices. So there's kind of this dilemma of, maybe the paper is what they've used in the past or what the teachers are used to, but now they're moving to other devices, and there's this hybrid scenario of like students using some paper, some PCs, some tablets, and really we need to find a solution to help students in the end of the day learn, right? And so really it depends on the interface to enhance the students' learning abilities. And it's not to replace anything that they've been doing previously on paper, but to really enhance it. And that's really, an overall vision of Microsoft is, allowing the end users to do more with the technology. And so there's no difference here with students where they really just get an enhanced capability to learn because of the technology that we're providing. In this case, would be OneNote and a few other technologies. So let me talk through kind of what is the learning journey for a student. So for us, it's about thinking, allowing the students to think in the way that is most, natural to them. So for them, it might have been using paper in the past, but now it's more and more about moving to the digital world. There's a lot of research on the previous slide. You saw Sharon Oviatt. Sharon Oviatt has done some research specifically around retention of knowledge via handwriting versus typing. And so we want students to learn in a way that is both natural to them and allows them to continue to retain knowledge so that they can be successful in school. And then expressing those ideas. So there's different ways of learning, obviously. And so students need to be able to express themselves in the way that's most natural to them, whether that's visually, through audio, through handwriting, through, there's multiple different ways. Video is another one when you bring in like Office Mix. We see a number of different things happening with Sway, where students are creating really interactive presentations. So there's a number of different ways that students can use technology to learn in the way that is most natural to them. And actually what we see in that way is that students are able to then catch up with the class in areas that maybe they were falling behind before. And I'll show you some examples of that. But really the area that we're seeing, I think, the most potential for technology in education is with regards to collaboration. So the things that we'll talk about with OneNote really start and end with collaboration. And the collaboration not only between students and other students, but also students and teachers, students and faculty. And so the potential to have real-time feedback between two students working on a presentation together, having, a teacher and a student in a classroom working on an activity, and the teacher able to immediately see where a student is falling behind. That's amazing potential where technology can help. And so that's one of the things that we'll focus on in this presentation. So let's take a look at kind of how we got to this place we are with OneNote in education. I have a quick video to show you. Let's get some audio.
Education experiences were very standardized. There was very little accommodation to individual differences. And so we started to label students as being at risk or failing.
In the past, teachers and coaches often thought that there was one correct way to do everything, whether it was a tennis stroke or learning how to solve an arithmetic problem. What we're learning now is that different approaches work for different students, that some work better in a visual modality, some in an audio modality, and the technology makes this all possible.
OneNote is a really interesting education success story. It's been nibbling around the edges globally for many years, and right now we're seeing an explosion. And the reason for this is it lends itself perfectly to personalised learning.
When we first started doing user tests of OneNote, we put it in the hands of some university students, and what we saw was the light bulb started to go on for them, and they said, this is pretty amazing. Like, I can capture all this information and search it, find anything really quickly. I don't lose it because it's always backed up. I can write on it, I can type, I can record my voice. It engages the students in their own individual working style. But once you get people together in a group, was the idea that really this is a shared place where people can collaborate. Kids can go at their own pace, they can go ahead, the teacher can sort of virtually look over their shoulder.
Some of the benefits we see from our students using OneNote is those students that were not really into being part of the class, not really engaged in what was going on. Now through OneNote, we see better writing, we see better annotating, we see better cognitive interrogation. It actually transforms the way student to teacher to teacher, and student to teacher interact in a way that nothing else does.
About a year ago, we decided to just float the idea of using OneNote in the classroom. And now I can say that the only teacher that doesn't use OneNote starting in 3rd grade is the PE teacher. We believe that every student deserves a personalized education. It doesn't matter if you're in an independent school, a private school, a wealthy school, an underprivileged school, that it shouldn't just be limited to our school and that it shouldn't be a secret anymore. And so we wanted to share this with more teachers.
Teachers want to become better teachers. School leaders want to run schools where innovative teaching and learning flourishes. So events like this event held at St Thomas are really super successful because it privileges and values the hard work of teachers, their inspiring learning design. It highlights and celebrates the great work of school leaders in creating environments where learners are able to truly take control of their learning process. It's a beautiful coming together of seeing technology levered to improve learning.
So with that as kind of a backdrop for what we're going to be talking about today, you saw a number of things. You saw how teachers are implementing the technology in the classroom. You saw how they're then talking about it with other teachers and other institutions about what they're doing with OneNote education. So we've seen all of that over really an 8-month span. And so there's a lot of potential still. But the thing that is most important is how OneNote is helping the students. And so when we talk about what OneNote is, it's something that is immediately familiar to a student. And why is that? It's because it's just a digital notebook, right? It's got a notebook on the upper left, you got the tabs along the top, and you got the pages on the right. It varies a little bit across platforms what that looks like. But in the end of the day, it's something that is approachable to them. They can go to it and they can just start completing their work, taking their notes, capturing information from the web. What you can see here is they're embedding audio files, handwriting. You can have things like embedded documents. So really, OneNote becomes that glue between the rest of the Office stack where you can import different types of files and annotate on them, so say like a PowerPoint presentation. So really, in the end of the day, it's a perfect tool for students. And because of that, it's also a perfect tool for teachers. Teachers are picking it up because their students are running with it. And so there's not a learning curve for the students to really need to get trained on it, and the teachers kind of get pulled along for the ride in many cases. I can share a short story with you that I started working on OneNote in education mainly when I went into a classroom at St. Thomas and I saw a 3rd grade teacher. They all had Surfaces, but it really could have been any device. And the students were using OneNote. Teacher said, we threw out our paper binders halfway through the school year for journaling and for most classroom activities. And I said, so how much did you teach them how to use the technology? She said, nothing. I had no technology background. So, I mean, that's an example of where, OneNote is such an approachable tool for a student, something that they pick up naturally. They're used to swiping on their iPads when they grow up. It's kind of scary. But OneNote really takes advantage of that and allowing them to learn in the way that's most natural to them. And so an important point when we talked about, the device dilemma is that OneNote is now across devices, and we're improving it consistently across devices. So we started on Windows in 2003, and then since then we've been consistently improving it. Consistently making adaptations, adding new features to it, and then recently, about a year ago, we added a new capability on the Mac to have the app there. We've added handwriting support on the iPad, on the Android devices, and of course you have it on all the phones on those platforms as well. And that's one of those things where we are listening to feedback from educators and students on what are the features that we want to take from the desktop version, which is more kind of feature-rich, and bring over to those other platforms. The other thing that's happened is OneNote, as an organization over the last 8 months, has grown a lot. There's been a big investment in OneNote. But specifically, we've taken a whole group of engineers and devoted them to education. So I have my own engineering team working in Vancouver right now, Vancouver, Canada, that is specifically working on education stuff, nothing else for OneNote. And so when there are requests from education institutions, teachers, students, we're able to quickly iterate on them and add new features. And a great example of that is what we've done with the class notebook and staff notebook, which I'll show you. And so OneNote for educators, some of the things that we saw in that video, it all starts with saving time, right? Teachers do not have a lot of time. As Miss McGraw in the 3rd grade classroom said, I don't have time to train the kids on technology. What am I supposed to do with the technology that's given to me? And in many cases, it's Chromebooks and iPads or Surfaces even, and they don't have the time to really implement it. So what can we do from a product perspective to make it easier for them to implement the technology without having to take time out of the real important things, which are teaching the students? And an organization. So how does OneNote help them stay organized? I mean, most classrooms have a lot of paper. There's filing cabinets, there's handouts, there's binders of papers from the students. A lot of students are not turning in their work because it's just stuck in their backpack. How can a teacher help the classroom get organized? OneNote can help with that, with its kind of digital binder structure. And as I said, the most interesting thing that's different than just paper is the collaboration capabilities. How can OneNote allow for a teacher and a student and students to collaborate together in one shared place? And so when we talk to some of our customers who have been using OneNote in their schools for a long period of time, we hear things like this. OneNote is so much more than a piece of software. It's a framework for education. That's where the title of this session came from. It came from Rob Baker. I mean, they've been supposedly using one-to-one longer than any institution in the U.S. And so he can speak to, it's really become this framework where every single class has a notebook for the students and the teacher to collaborate. And so outside of just those, tried and true folks who've been using OneNote for a long period of time, just over the last few months, we've seen amazing innovation across the globe. So in the upper right-hand corner or upper left-hand corner, you see interactive activities coming from Macedonia, where a teacher is creating the activities and lessons all in OneNote, with snipping maps from the web, having the students take pictures of themselves, inserting audio files. But really, it's all about the activity itself, which is helping students to create a profile for themselves, understand geography, understand video and audio. And so that's where OneNote really becomes that one place that they can all go to conduct that activity. You can see here in the upper right, you have a Kodu lesson coming from Norway. And this, I actually had the pleasure of visiting this school in Norway, the Shetten School. And this teacher is self-proclaimed extremely OCD. I'll show you some of the examples of her work. She uses tags for everything. And she's got her students all using OneNote for planning their Kodu lessons. And so they were actually able to go to the championships for Norway in Kodu. So really exciting stuff where the technology is really helping them succeed. Let me show you an example that's coming from France that I think is a great example of how OneNote can help even the students who are really struggling.
Dyslexic children don't just mix up letters. They struggle when it comes to automating language. Language in a broad sense. Reading, writing, and organization. This difficulty causes children to be distracted by language and not concentrate their attention on the task of learning. 200,000 pupils in the French school system suffer from these kind of problems. Our dyslexia works to help children deal with all their schoolwork. Each child has a computer in their school bag. It contains all their schoolwork and replaces a pencil, manuals, and workbooks. We needed a tool to help each child accomplish all these tasks. OneNote is at the heart of this system. It's very simple. It is very accessible and very powerful. Powerful because with OneNote, Microsoft has integrated character recognition, multilingual correctors, a stylus, and software. Everything that a child could need. Geography maps that can be colored in, life sciences where you can draw diagrams, insert audio files or a program, GeoGebra, which is used for mathematics. GeoGebra is integrated into OneNote.
OneNote is super easy. For example, in OneNote, everything is saved. You don't even need to save. What's good about it is that if one day you're in the middle of writing and OneNote isn't responding, it automatically saves itself. There's the folder mode, and there are dividers and pages inside. That's what's good about it.
For him, I think that when it comes to working with photocopies, and we often work with photocopies, because there aren't many manuals, this provides an organizational system where he is at ease, because managing a folder is too complicated. So thanks to this, he is more independent. He is less forgetful too, because he always has his school bag with him.
This tool provides dyslexic children with total independence in class. They no longer need a teacher to spend 10 or 15 minutes just with them. Plus, they just don't have the time. They are completely autonomous. They work at the same pace as the others.
Children enjoy our dyslexia. We've seen this very often. We've proved it, and there are lots of examples of this. In the end, we realized that these dyslexic children were working 2 to 3 times faster on their computer than they were on paper. This means that they get home having finished all their schoolwork and can spend their evenings like all other kids.
In France, we see high levels of failure among young students in their first or second year of school, faced with methodologies that they aren't prepared for. Whereas we prepare dyslexic children for this methodology, thanks to OneNote, and teach them how to use the computer, which puts them into a successful position ready for university.
The first year we tried out the experience with 12 school children. Second year we were working with the Association of Parents of Dyslexic Children, ANAPIDIS, with 100 children. Then, thanks to a donation from Air France and the help of the Atelier du Bocage, a company dedicated to reinsertion that completely restores computers, we distributed 1,400 computers to children across France and the French territories.
Up until now, they've always felt as if they are running behind, staying behind in class during break time, when the teacher is available, always running behind. Now, they're on track. They have really thrown themselves into their classes, and that is a fundamental change.
So that's a great example of where the flexibility of OneNote as well as having it all in one place where the students have to go, is really helping those students. What are some of the things that you all saw in that video that make OneNote a little bit different? Oh, sorry. Yeah. Thanks, Daryl. Switch back. So there are a few things that we saw there with OneNote, like the scanning abilities, being able to scan into OneNote, having the students be able to actually write on their PC and be able to draw maps, annotate things, but really becoming that one place for them to go and not having them be distracted by other applications. So it's a real benefit is it becomes that digital school bag, as Dennis was saying. And actually what we're working on right now is scaling out his solution not only in France, but across the globe. So he's working directly with our engineering teams to make that possible. A few other stories that I'd like to share before I jump into some of the demos. One of the things that we've seen is the ability to actually do some flipped classroom and differentiated learning with OneNote. And with the class notebook, that's specifically possible where a teacher can give students assignments to help them catch up without the other students knowing. So being able to actually drag and drop assignments into notebooks help them move forward. As well as looking at a special needs class where you might have a paraeducator who normally sits next to the student. As a student, I wouldn't want an adult sitting next to me in the class. It's sometimes embarrassing for them. But now, with OneNote and the collaboration capabilities, a paraeducator can actually sit in another room and help the student along by simply writing a note in the page and say, do you need help here? And a student could maybe even say, hey, I have a question. And a student can add a question mark and say, how do I do this part? And then a paraeducator could be sitting in the other room and say, oh, what are the questions that are being asked? They can see it immediately there. So this notebook is shared between maybe a student, a paraeducator, a teacher, and a student, maybe even a student and a student, and they're able to actually see in real time where there might be some need for help. So I'm just going to show you a few examples of what is possible with OneNote, and these are all real-world examples of student work in OneNote. So you can see, this is a graded assignment in OneNote, forces, gravity, Newton's law of motion, basically a printed handout that has been completed by a student and graded by a teacher, all within the context of OneNote. Religion projects, being able to use annotation on a map with a stylus. You can see different types of multimedia here with images. A lot of great inking here with handwriting, being able to fill out worksheets. Many of you probably know you can print to OneNote. So that's a great way to kind of take the stuff that you already have as an educator, bring it into OneNote, be able to allow students to then fill it out and then you to grade it. Here's another great example of math lessons. I was mentioning to you about some of the teacher examples. Here is a lesson plan that really shows the full capabilities of OneNote, where you have both, the images, you have links, you have embedded documents that you could just, go in here and, open up the jazz presentation. And maybe while I'm doing that, I could have an audio playing. I'm a big fan of jazz. I don't know how many of you have been to the jazz clubs here. Maybe I want to play Get Happy. Need a little audio. There you go. It just adds to the lesson to have the audio that goes along with the jazz lesson. A few other examples here of work done in OneNote. You can see, learning targets. So teachers working together on, how do they want to conduct their lessons? Project-based learning. Able to add that in here and share that between two teachers in a shared OneNote notebook. And so that's just a few of the examples. So now, once you understand kind of the basis for what's possible with OneNote by itself, so this isn't adding any Office 365 or class notebooks or staff notebooks. This is just OneNote as a free application. Then you kind of take it to the next level and you say, okay, so how do I actually scale this throughout an entire school, throughout an entire district, throughout even an entire country, to make it possible for some of the things that you saw with differentiated, personalized learning. And so let me just show you real quickly what a class notebook looks like. So this is a class notebook. So you saw a second ago just a normal notebook. A class notebook is just slightly different in the sense that it has different permissions set up for different parts of the notebook. So think a regular shared notebook is the collaboration space where everyone has access, full access to edit and read and write and do anything they want in that shared space. So that's teachers and students collaborating in one place. And so a great example is, they're working on a group project. You can see that jazz lesson that I just showed you, and there's, annotations. You can see if I mouse over any of the folks in here, you can see that who's been editing it and when. And so it becomes that kind of one place for everyone to collaborate. You can have different group projects. This is a great example of a mind map done in OneNote. So you could actually have this projected up to a whiteboard. I mean, who needs a smartboard anymore? When you can just project this up to your whiteboard, maybe using Miracast or just Hardwire, and a teacher or students are conducting the lesson all within this OneNote notebook, and then the students can refer back to it later. You can see discussions. Maybe that's my friend Mike. He's got an image, and he's even got his audio recording to go with it. I don't know how many of you have heard my one and only OneNote. This guy is an engineer on the OneNote team. He's hoping to release it for the Grammys next year. I don't know if he'll win, but so we have that shared place, and then we have the content library. And you can think about the content library as kind of that digital filing cabinet. That's where the teacher takes their handouts that might have been in Word documents, they might have been in hard copy paper, and scans them all into OneNote. And then what they can do is just distribute them to the student through this shared place. Students cannot edit this area, but they can copy it and bring it into their individual notebook. So say a student wants to copy this one. They can copy it, and then they can bring it into their individual notebooks, which I'll show you in just a second. It's also a great place for lecture notes. So you could have all your lecture notes or calendars in here. You have a projector printout. It's a great example of a handout created just in OneNote for a student to then go fill out. And so what we can do is then go over to our student notebooks. So this is the teacher view, where the teacher sees all of the different student notebooks. But as a student, I could jump over here and just paste that handout that I just grabbed and then start filling it out, right? I'm not going to try to do math right now, but there goes my other OneNote app. We do have a Windows 10 app coming out. It just wanted to show itself to you. So, they can start filling it out, right? And so then the teacher is able to see the work that they're doing through that student notebook and can go in, and maybe I'm the teacher, and I can go in, maybe grab my red marker and start grading it, right? And so, 9 out of 10. And so what that allows for is that real-time feedback within the student notebooks that the other students can't see. And so the teacher no longer needs to be sitting and grading, on their own or walking around the class to see how the students are doing. They just, walk around the class with their laptop, with their Surface Pro 3 ideally, and be able to just see what's going on. And especially during like an in-class activity, it's a great way for them to have visibility into what's going on. And so these are kind of default sections that are in OneNote. So you can see, maybe a heat transfer project. I have my friend Liz in the back of the room here, who actually, this is her real work from school. And what's great about Liz is she actually has great handwriting. So she can, if you have good handwriting like Liz does, which is a skill that has fallen off the map, and I'm a good example of it because I have horrible handwriting, you can search on text. So a student can search within their notebook and find all of the text that matches the search that they just typed in. And that search is within text, within images, with the optical character recognition. And so for someone like Liz who has great handwriting, they could do all of their notes in OneNote and search it very easily. Examples of homework, so some of the things you saw before. Quizzes can all be done in OneNote. Readings and audio recordings that go with those readings can all be done there as well. So that's just an example of what the class notebook looks like. So let me show you how easy it is for a teacher to then go and create one of these class notebooks. And so this is the OneNote Class Notebook Creator. We're actually shortening it to just be OneNote Class Notebook because a lot of people said it's too much of a mouthful to say the creator part. So OneNote Class Notebook is just it's basically a wizard to walk you through creating that notebook that I just showed you. So say I want to, create my class. Who's got a class? The teacher in the room. Who's got a class? Oh, right here. GED. Okay, GED is our class here. Oh, just one D. Hit next. And then this is where the teacher is acclimated with, what are the different permissions on this particular notebook? The things that I just walked through. So you have the collaboration space, the content library, and the student notebooks, all with different permissions. And you can kind of think about them as sub-notebooks, but they're called section groups within OneNote. So then here I have the ability to add a teacher. And this is a great call out to where we've actually listened to feedback. So one of the things that we heard was, hey, I'm using Google Classroom and they don't have the co-teacher capability. Well, we said, okay, well, we'll add it to OneNote Class Notebook. So we added the co-teacher feature for just that scenario where you have two teachers, maybe a assistant teacher or maybe a substitute. And so you add them in here. And so my good buddy Mike, the musical artist, will add him in as my co-teacher. And then I can just add my student names. So here I could start typing them if I wanted to. And it'll just look within Office 365 Active Directory for those names. And you can see I could add them that way. In this case, I'm going to grab all those names and just dump it right in. And one of the things that we're doing is I had my friend Christoph here in the room a second ago who's working on Office 365 groups. What we're working on is actually having Office 365 groups work with this. So you could just have class lists in groups and be able, I got some cheers here for people using Class Notebook. So that will be happening in the next couple months where we have Office 365 groups and you don't have to just manually enter in those student names. So hit next, and this is where you're able to customize each of those student notebooks. So there's a default, handouts, class notes, homework, quizzes. Maybe what's another section that we could have in there that's not one of those? Projects. Okay, so great. So we'll add a projects one. And we could add more if we wanted to, or we could remove others. We'll just keep those for now. And we'll hit next. And then this is where you get the view of what that notebook will actually look like after you hit create. And so you have the teacher notebook, which looks like this, with the two shared spaces, collaboration space, content library, and then the student notebooks along the left. And then you have the student notebook, which is essentially, it's the same notebook, just a different view of it, where you have the two shared spaces and just that individual student's notebook with those sections that we just assigned. So with that, we hit create. And in the background, it's whirling, and it's doing all these permissions that used to be extremely difficult. You can ask a few folks in the audience. It's not easy to create these SharePoint permissions to make it possible to have one notebook with different section groups for different roles. So what it's doing is it's actually not only creating the notebook, but it's sending an email to all those students who are added to the notebook to say, hey, you've been invited by your teacher into this notebook. So if I want to, I can either, I can start opening that notebook as the teacher. And so in a second, it'll start opening. And while I'm doing that, I can go back to the browser. I could just grab that link, because it's just a link. It lives in the cloud. So I can go here, and I could say, here's my class notebook. I want to open it up in the browser. Maybe I don't have OneNote installed yet. And so I can hit that. It'll open there. I take that same link, and I can put it in my student account. So I'm over here. I could paste it in the browser, but look, I got an email. So I'm student 1 now, as you can see here. Student 1, who was just added to the notebook, can see that they just got an email and can say, oh, I want to open GED. And there's my notebook as it opens. And so student 1 can go in and just start filling out their handouts. The teacher can add content in there. Maybe they have a shared notebook or personal notebook where they're keeping all of their lesson plans like you were seeing in OneNote, so they can just drag and drop those into the new class notebook. And what I'll show you actually with the staff notebook is a great example of where you can take this, a shared teacher notebook and then use this class notebook as kind of the end place where it lands. And so you can see, maybe my teacher, the administrator, is in this notebook as well. And so the student can just start, filling out their assignment. And the teacher, open that same notebook and go into student 1. And, of course that comes up. It's a syncing thing, right? I definitely saw a few other demos where there was some vulgar language like that. So if we jump into student 1 here, you'll see that the completed assignment 1, which is a little bit better. And what's great is then the teacher can go in, she can just open up this notebook, and she sees all of the student notebooks and all of their sections. And so when she's grading, she can actually go in here, and in a second it will sync up. There you go. Assignment 1, students started working on it. What's great, actually, and this is a capability that I didn't know about until just a week or so ago, where you can hit Next Unread. And so what that does is when those sections get bolded, like an email that hasn't been read, this teacher can just hit Next Unread, and as the students are completing their work, just jump between the different sections and different assignments that the students are working on, all within that class notebook. So pretty cool capabilities of just leveraging, some of the things that they're used to with email and be able to use it in a class notebook. So that's the class notebook. Let me jump back to the slides for just a second and kind of recap what we just saw there. So what we saw was a teacher. She wants to create a notebook for her class. She sees everything in that notebook, the collaboration space, content library, and the student notebooks. While little Johnny over here, the student, has a link to the notebook that the teacher either sent to them or they got an email in Office 365 with it. And they only see their personal space in those shared places. And of course, what happens is students get all the benefits of OneNote that I showed you in the beginning, but they also get some of these things like real-time coaching, like having the ability to collaborate with their teacher on an ongoing basis, and at the end of the year, have a digital portfolio. And this is actually something we haven't really realized the potential for just yet, because we haven't even had a year with class notebooks yet. So we'll see at the end of this year as the schools who've been using class notebooks start to archive some of the student work. But on an ongoing basis, what we've seen, with parent-teacher conferences is that this class notebook becomes kind of that e-portfolio for the students in the parent-teacher conferences. And so we saw the demo there. And so what are the things that we've been hearing about the class notebook? I know a few of you in the room will probably came up to me beforehand and shared what you thought of it. But we keep hearing things both on Twitter and in person. This is just some of our field, our Microsoft field, who've actually demoed OneNote Class Notebook to some of their customers. So Ashanka said, I showed the OneNote Class Notebook to the Education Minister of Rwanda and his team this morning. They want to implement it nationwide. That's the type of thing that we've been seeing. I mean, where it's so powerful to just see what's possible with the class notebook that, ministries of education are actually thinking about using Office 365. Same with, Syracuse and higher ed of being able to use Office 365 because they want to roll it out to their teachers. Alice Keeler, a very influential teacher, said, have you tried the class notebook creator? It's revolutionary. And others, saying they're starting to implement one-to-one programs, and this is becoming the content delivery, collaboration, and structure that they needed in order to make that implementation. And so these are just a few other things that have been said so far. This is mainly from teachers. A window into their brains, student engagement, accountability is improved. It's shifting the way I'm teaching. And we love to hear these things. I mean, this is just reinforcement for the work that we're doing on OneNote specifically for education. A great example of this is actually a school that just recently moved one-to-one at the beginning of this school year and was looking for a solution to help collaboration between students and students, students and teachers. And this is Sammamish High School. And so they're a little bit in our backyard, so it's easy to help them along. But what they've done is they are, not necessarily a tech magnet school. They, just moved one-to-one this year, but most of their student body is extremely diverse. I think they have students from over 50 different countries who are at the school, and they speak over 5 different languages at the school. And it's not a wealthy area, but they've moved one-to-one at the district level as a decision and as part of a grant. And so now what they're doing is they're all using Lenovo Yoga PCs and implementing OneNote class notebooks in all of their classes. And so what they're seeing is amazing growth, and what it's allowing them to do is just do all of the things that they were planning to do with or without technology, and which for them is problem-based learning. And one of the interesting, and I'll show you a little bit about how they're doing that, but before I do that, students demanded that the teachers start using class notebooks in the classes that they didn't have them. That's an example of where students are taking to OneNote and really finding it to be a natural way for them to do their work. So let me jump into that. So 6 months of class notebooks here. Whoops. Go back there. Actually it's having a little bit of trouble loading the video here, so I'm gonna jump over to my PC and just show you there.
I think about teaching when I get up in the morning, when I'm driving to work, and even when I'm sleeping.
The real world is changing. Technology is a big part of your life.
It just makes life a lot easier to do real world stuff.
At Sammamish High School, we have made the commitment that all students are career and college ready. And so we enroll all of them in advanced placement human geography, where students in high school can earn college level credit. During the course of the year, we do problem-based learning challenges. We call a unit or a project a challenge.
These are the current attendance boundary lines.
Problem-based learning involves several tenets. Authentic problems.
I think it's too far away from Bellevue.
Outside expertise.
All the way to the Supreme Court.
And collaboration.
And then we take some in Newport, yeah.
At the start of this school year, Sammamish High School rolled out a one-to-one technology program. All students received a Windows 8 tablet device with Office 365, including OneNote. Using the OneNote class notebook, I'm able to give all of my students the resources that they need, and I'm able to see their work at a moment's notice.
Today in class, we worked on the redistricting challenge. I used OneNote for that, and we took notes and we asked questions to each other.
It's a middle school and high school that it should have its own attendance area. A real problem makes me want to try harder.
So let's brainstorm here.
It wasn't lecture-based, it was hands-on, doing projects, working in group atmospheres, and then presenting the solution as your end product.
And it may be really hard for the students and the staff members.
So this is Dr. Paul Sutton.
As part of the challenge, I bring in industry experts and I let them help guide students on their journey.
I'm blown away by what students are doing in that classroom.
To Sammamish, it's going to change the incomes.
Okay. Kids are asking good questions. They're holding each other accountable.
And do you agree how we split the bridle trails in half? There's not just race, there's not just ethnicity.
So they can collaborate in real time, find resources immediately online.
There you go.
One of the cool things about OneNote is students are able to use it in a way that fits their learning styles.
We all have different ideas, but we collaborate with each other, and I think that kind of challenges me.
It makes them unafraid to fail.
I know for me personally,
Kids just approach learning from the standpoint of, my friend did this really cool thing, maybe I should do some of those things too.
it's taught me how to use a lot of tools that professionals use.
They're really getting a chance to look like the experts. It becomes more authentic. Problem-based learning at Sammamish High School will help students gain the knowledge and the skills that they need to compete in a 21st century world.
It was the best choice that Sammamish ever made.
And so actually we have Sammamish talking to the National School Board Association. We had that last week when they were up in Seattle. We're going to have them also speaking at the ISTE conference. How many of you are attending ISTE this year? Any of you? A few of you, okay. So you'll be able to hear directly from them if you attend. So these are just some of the benefits that you heard in that video. Synchronous feedback, dramatically shortening the learning cycle, project-based learning, giving feedback, the digital portfolio, and being able to see and provide feedback and increasing student accountability and engagement. And I think that's really the end goal there. And so now, let's take this a step further. And let's get into, how could you use this not only between teachers and students, but between teachers and teachers, teachers and administrators. Maybe you're in a higher ed institution and you want to work collectively as a staff. And this is actually a direction that you could go outside of just education. You could go into any organization that has a hierarchy where you have a manager and you have direct reports. And so this is where we heard the feedback. We saw people actually using the class notebook for their own use cases that didn't involve students. And so very similarly to the class notebook, we have a collaboration space, content library, and not student notebooks. Sorry, that's a typo there. Actually, the staff notebooks. And the staff notebooks are basically a place for these three things. You have collaboration on things like staff meeting notes, staff initiatives, shared lesson plan development, scope and sequence across different grades, PLCs. The content library becomes a place for policies and procedures. So the things that you were doing previously, maybe on a wiki site or on your out-of-date website, can now be published in the content library so that all of the staff can access it. And then you have the staff notebooks, which are the area for the staff to collaborate with their managers, maybe a head of school or principal, superintendent, on things like professional development, classroom observations, lesson plans. And so let me show you exactly what that looks like. So we'll jump over to our staff notebook here. And so again, looks very similar to the class notebook, but what we've done is just customized some of the sections within it. So you have the collaboration space, and you can see, you have staff meeting notes. And one of the best things about staff meeting notes that many people don't know about OneNote is that the tight integration with Outlook comes in handy here. So say I add a page, and I want to insert meeting details for my company meeting today. Just insert that in. There you go. And I get all of that information, the invitation message, the attendees, the link to the Outlook item. And so that's a great way to take the capabilities of OneNote and bring it into this staff notebook. Shared initiatives like fundraisers, Spirit Week, shared resources, something that maybe these are living resources that you want people to continue to add to. You could have tide charts. This is an interesting implementation we've seen from some principals who are trying to get an understanding of, how are students doing in their school on a day-to-day and week-to-week basis. So teachers and staff can go in there and, put in the students' names and say kind of how they're doing this week. And so you can see that, there's different notes for the week of 2/8 through 2/14 so that that principal easily gets a view of what's going on throughout the school. It's also a great place for shared lesson plans. And this is where you could have, 6th grade math all working together on their lesson plans. And so this is a lesson plan from Norway. That teacher I said was OCD. She's, tagging all of her lessons like this. And so you can see some of the examples there of lesson plans. And then, you could have teachers giving feedback on that, all in this shared place. And then the content library that I mentioned, might replace a wiki. You get things like policy emails, email policies, extracurricular programs. You have the associated Word documents in there, maybe field trip policies. One of my favorite stories is that you have a principal who doesn't know the fire drill procedures, and he's on his phone, and he's trying to figure out what he's supposed to do in the fire drill, and he can pull up his phone with the staff notebook and get all those fire drill procedures all within OneNote. Internet use, things that are just kind of shared for all the staff for them to refer to later on. You could have like emails that they're categorizing as well. So you have the send to OneNote feature and email. So it's a great way to just start archiving those things in a shared place. And then the staff member notebooks, things like 21st century learning design. You can have that in the professional development areas of each of the staff members so that they can refer to it and start developing on it. Classroom observations. I call this modern classroom observations because what it is it's combining multimedia. It's not just a hard copy sheet that the principal walks into the classroom with and starts, writing on it and then throws in a pile on his desk. He now has it in the individual teacher's notebook and can give them real-time feedback as the classroom observation is going on, annotating things that are going on in the classroom. Maybe the teacher has it open on her machine so that she's able to see exactly what he's saying and really guide the class in that way too. You can see, Venn diagrams. One of my favorites is audio recording, so you could actually have a class recording of what's going on. Many people don't know that audio recording in OneNote actually ties to the exact timestamp that you make a note. So say I was recording an audio item, it would actually highlight the specific note that I made at that particular point. And so this is an example of actually a hard copy document for observation that has been printed into OneNote and filled out. So all kinds of different things you could do there. And then lesson plan feedback. Maybe you want some individual lesson plan feedback from your principal, curriculum developer. Parent communications, things like that. But really these categories can be customized for whatever your teacher or your entire school wants to have within them. And so essentially, the class notebook is exactly the same as the staff notebook. We just took that exact same wizard and customized it for staff. So I'm not going to walk through each and every step because it's exactly the same. But the hope is that we get these two very custom apps out, and then we get feedback on what are the things that we could do to make these better and make them more more personalized to what you guys are all trying to do in your institutions. And so we really look for feedback, and one of the things that we're trying to do is actually allow it to be customized by each individual. So maybe you have content that you want preceded in each and every staff notebook or each and every class notebook. That could be something that we release in the near future. So definitely looking for feedback on these things. The staff notebook was released just about 3 months ago. So it's fairly new, and we're seeing new use cases all the time, especially from principals, actually. So jump back to the presentation. There's the staff notebook. So I always we have about 15 minutes left, and I want to make sure we have a lot of time for questions. You might ask, why am I wearing a cape? And there's a story here. So when I started on OneNote in Education, I saw that there was another group at Microsoft, actually the legal department, who was using these capes at conferences. And I said, oh, well, they're kind of cool, they're flashy, they kind of fit the mold of what a OneNote fan should be. And so I started going to conferences, and teachers saw me wearing it and were like, I want a cape. And so what we've seen is an explosion of capes across the globe. We have, in the right-hand corner, Manteca School District. We have the Bet Show in London with teachers. Those are the Norwegian teachers. This is not stuff that we have been going around capturing. This is all on Twitter. So if you look up OneNote Cape on Twitter, you're going to find some amazing things like this and more. And you see Alice Keeler, an influencer. You see Mike Dolfson, my colleague there, at the Bet Show with all the teachers in their capes. We actually have a site now that's I could put up on the projector, OneNote, which is basically aka.ms Get OneNote capes. You can go purchase your capes, because we found out from our legal department that we can't be giving away capes anymore. So if you want to purchase the cape for $5, you can do that for your public service employees. So let's bring it all back together now that you've seen everything. It's really all about the OneNote school, the ability to collaborate throughout a school with OneNote being just kind of the glue between it. So you have the staff notebooks with that structure that I talked to you about, with all those different use cases. You have the class notebooks with the teachers and the students working together. And then through it all, I mean, there's the ability to use OneNote on a personal use basis. And that's the thing I didn't spend a lot of time in this session talking about. There's a session tomorrow that I'm doing at 5 o'clock, which is really more about kind of personal and work use cases of OneNote. And so you'll be able to learn more about that during that session. But you know, if you need to capture anything, I'd say this is kind of a summary of the investments that we have in education right now. And so let's take a look at, you know, what's coming in the next little bit. And what are the things that we've been hearing from education institutions, teachers, and students about what we should do next. One of the things is content conversion. You know, how do I get my documents that are in Word and PDFs, you know, maybe in Google Docs or Evernote, you know, things like that. How do I bring them into OneNote? And so we're creating tools to make that possible. We're going to start with, you know, Word and PDFs, because those are the ones that most people have. And so what it'll basically be able to do is suck in all that content and create that hierarchy within a OneNote notebook. You know, also coming this spring, we're thinking about having the class notebook be installed by default in every Office 365 education tenant. So one of the things that I didn't cover in this session, and I should have been a little bit more upfront about it, is I didn't talk about the deployment of this app, which is really not difficult. You know, and we have a site, onenoteaneducation.com, which walks through step-by-step for an IT administrator to deploy the app, both to, you know, a OneDrive for Business or a SharePoint team site. But what we're trying to do, and why I didn't dwell on it in this session, is, you know, we are going to make it installed by default. And we want teachers to be able to discover it much more easily than they have today. And so whether that's putting it in the waffle, you know, the thing in the upper left of Office 365, or having a direct link to it so that a teacher can just hit a link and get into that wizard without ever dealing with the rest of Office 365, we're going to try to make that possible, to have it really be friction-free. You know, and then also in this spring, we're working on enabling APIs with Office 365 to allow for the integration of the class notebook into existing LMSs. So whether that's Edmodo or Blackboard, Canvas, be able to have a class notebook within that environment as well. So that, yes, I know. I got word from the engineering team today that they were, you know, working hard on that. I was like, okay, sweet, I can talk about it. And then in the summer, the other thing that we've heard a lot of is, how do I share my content really quickly with maybe a teacher across the globe? You know, when I want to collaborate on a particular lesson plan or development of curriculum, something like that is really where this new Get a Copy feature comes in. And so you can think about it as, you know, a teacher has created a notebook on OneDrive, and they make it a public notebook, kind of like, you know, the public notebook you guys have for the Ignite conference here, right? So that's a public read-only notebook. And say they want to have people be able to go to that notebook and not only view it, but also be able to edit it themselves without changing the master copy. That's where this Get a Copy feature comes in, and they can hit a button and they say, I want a copy of this notebook. It instantly downloads to their OneDrive, OneDrive for Business, you know, and then they're able to you know, customize it without changing that master copy. So that's coming very soon. It's something that we want to have for conferences like this one next year at Ignite. And then in the summer, again, kind of building on what I was talking about with having a kind of that friction-free on-ramp for teachers with the class notebook, we're exploring how do we do, you know, freemium with this? How do we allow a teacher who might not have Office 365 to be able to still have a class notebook experience? Because as we've seen with, you know, Sammamish and others, it's a powerful experience to use the class notebook with their students. So we're exploring what that might look like in terms of offering that to all teachers. And so along the way, we're still investing in OneNote across platforms, making it better not only for education, But for other verticals, my session tomorrow will talk a little bit more about the investments that we have across platforms, and so we'll be able to show that. And so the hope is that we get a lot of these things in before next school year, so that you can implement these during the school year and be able to have class notebooks, staff notebooks be used with Office 365. So I have a few resources here at the end that I want to make sure I mention. So there's the OneNote Teacher Playbook, which we just released. So this is basically a step-by-step guide to take a teacher who has never used OneNote before and help them get started with it. And so it's just a OneNote notebook, as you can see in the image there, that has step 1, learning OneNote, downloading it, getting started with it, staff collaboration, working with the students in the class notebook. And so there's case studies and interactive guides that they can step through, but really kind of a lightweight resources that they can download and start using. The other thing is OneNoteEducation.com. How many of you have gone to this site before? Maybe a few of you. Okay, so this is a great site for professional development. It's free professional development. It's my big giveaway today, aside from the capes and the T-shirts. So free professional development at OneNote it's OneNoteEducation.com, but if you type in OneNote for Teachers, it'll also go there. We've just recently added student and administrator guides, which include the guides that I was mentioning before of how to install the staff notebook and class notebook. So step-by-step in Office 365, how to get started with it, both from the teacher and the IT admin perspective. And then just some final resources here. I mean, if as an IT admin, there's a page that jumps directly to the app for the staff notebook, for the class notebook. Again, the OneNote Education page. The OneNote Education blog is a great place to learn about some of the case studies like Sammamish High School, like the folks in France. So we publish guest blogs on there. If you have a great use case for OneNote at your school, we'd love to hear about it. You can tweet at us at OneNoteEDU, which is a brand new Twitter handle, actually. So you can tweet at that, tweet at me, rbar13, and we'll hopefully get you published on our blog, because we love hearing the things that you guys are doing. So a little bit more. So some of the samples that I walked through today, those are all public. We've gotten sign-off from those teachers and those students for you to actually take a look at some of those lesson plans. As I said, the Get a Copy feature that's coming will make it much easier for you to actually be able to find one of these online and be able to quickly download it. Right now, you can either browse them in a public read-only mode, or you can download it on your Windows machine. Then there's case study videos, and this is all in the deck that'll be published. I also have some Sways. I'll make a little pitch for Sway. How many of you have used Sway in education? A few of you. You guys got to explore it. The amazing thing about Sway is, like OneNote, students just immediately pick up Sway. For whatever reason, it's an easy authoring tool for them for interactive presentations. And you remember students, I know like myself, used to spend days and days trying to get the animations right on your PowerPoint presentations. Now with Sway, they just provide the content, live multimedia content, and it pulls right into Sway, and it creates an interactive presentation for them. So there's a Sway session that I would definitely check out. It was a few days ago, but check that out on Channel 9 to learn more about that. But some great examples of Sways that have actually been made by some of our innovative educators. And then some related Ignite sessions. So actually, if you want a deeper dive on deployment of OneNote Class Notebook and other K-12 relevant solutions with Office 365, there's a theater session at 1:05 that I think I will be at as well. So check that out for a little bit more of a deep dive there. Other related sessions like the Sway one are up there, so take a look at those. And so we have a little bit of time left for questions, so I want to make sure I open it up. About 5 minutes left. And I'll take questions both in person at the microphones as well as in the notebook. I'll probably address those afterwards. Yep.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you, yeah.
Okay. Sorry, I have laryngitis.
Yeah.
Do you know anything about the Surface 3 discounts in education?
Surface 3 discounts. I am not really the one to speak to it. I know that they just announced it.
Right.
What was that? TechSoup, yeah. Okay, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I would go by the Surface booth to learn more about the Surface discounts. Yeah, thank you. Sure, back there.
Do you have, is there any metrics or logic that's built into the notebooks? So can a teacher tell if a student has been on a page for any length of time, and so you can see, like, has that student read this page? And furthermore, I mean, can you have boxes where, if the student writes in a number 5, that you can logically look to see that, well, they were supposed to write the number 5 in this box, and I can, have the notebook maybe flash up something that says you were correct or whatever.
So basically, the question was around monitoring an assessment within OneNote, built into OneNote, right? So right now, we don't have that capability. One of the things that we're doing with the new APIs is, allowing for something that might be a solution like that.
Okay.
I know we have partners like Class Policy is very interested in creating some of that kind of monitoring classroom management with OneNote. So we're working on making that available. Would it be built into OneNote? Probably not, just because OneNote is obviously more of a it's a general purpose application that works outside of just education, but it's definitely something that we're thinking about, and we've heard a lot of feedback. We actually have a user voice site. It's OneNote.uservoice.com where you can when you can submit things like that, specifically for education. But that's it's a great call out. Yeah. Sure, over here.
We use also the teacher notebook creator, but what is the difference between a team site in SharePoint and the app? There is a lot of discussion, what are we doing on a SharePoint team site for teachers, and what do we in the notebook app?
So it's a great question. So the question was around differences of use cases between SharePoint team sites and the OneNote Class Notebook. What we've seen with the OneNote Class Notebook is it's a more familiar and approachable UI for SharePoint. I mean, that's at its core, as an IT pro, I mean, that's how you could see it. I mean, the teachers are more likely to use something that looks like a notebook than looks like a bunch of folders on a website. So that's the thing that we've seen, and so we're going to continue to run with it. I mean, and as long as there's the permission management and versioning. I didn't show some of that, but there's versioning. If content is deleted, all these pages can be discovered in Delve. There's search on it. So definitely something where we don't see you're losing out by not using the team sites. You get a lot of that with OneNote Class Notebooks, but it's a better experience for a teacher.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. No problem. Sure.
Yeah, hi. One thing my district is looking into is creating a digital portfolio for our students to follow them and then to provide them when they graduate. And right now, with OneNote for Classroom, as we've been using it, we've been creating a site collection for each school and then subsites for each teacher. And obviously, we can't keep doing this every year and every year and every year. Is there any consideration to how we can make these more long-term and to follow a student as he or she progresses, through the grades, and to kind of associate it more with the student and have his or her work follow them than as opposed to just the class?
Yes, it's a great question. Basically around how do we consider these kind of e-portfolios that track a student's growth over time. So the guy that you actually saw in the video, the researcher, Jonathan Gruden, has been doing a lot of research on that exact scenario. How do we do end-of-year scenario with the class notebooks, and how do we archive them and create places where they can be referenced later on for finding out student growth? I don't think we have an exact answer on what that looks like. We've kind of turned to our customers like yourself to say, what are the things that you want to be able to do? Where do you want to put those class notebooks? What does that end-of-year scenario look like for you, where the easiest way for you to take all of those notebooks and put them somewhere that you can reference? Like, where are you putting them? I mean, where ideally would you put those notebooks?
Right now it's our first year with 365 and with OneNote. So we're really kind of piloting it out. So we really haven't thought about that too long term yet.
Yep.
But just off the top of my head, you know, some type of archive somewhere within our SharePoint tenant, or you know.
Yeah, and would that be pulling out the individual student notebooks from the class notebook and putting them there?
And putting them in some type of notebook associated with the student, maybe in his or her OneDrive or something, something like that. You know, it's just something that we've been thinking of.
And you guys have like a student information system that pulls in that,
we do. We do.
So I think there's some stuff that we're going to be doing around just student information and how we can kind of bring it together with the class notebook. So yeah, definitely something we're thinking about. Would love your feedback on the direction we should go with it.
Cool. Appreciate the plug for my Twitter session too.
Yeah. Thanks.
Quick comment first. Want to echo metrics. We have a professor who wants to study how long people spend learning and versus their success in the class, and so having that information available would be invaluable. Question on staff notebooks. What is the level of permissioning through your hierarchy? Can we have, people that can see certain things, and then as we get down further, we don't want them to have access, but it's all in the same staff notebook, and differentiate on a page level?
So the question is around, can you differentiate permissions at the page level?
Correct.
Versus the section group level. So right now, that's not possible, because basically what we've done with the staff notebook and class notebook is you have the permissions at that level, and OneNote doesn't enable any other permissioning aside from basically that notebook or sub-notebook level. So it's definitely a request that we've had to at least be able to lock down pages for certain people. I think there's probably some hacks that can be done to make that possible. I know Daryl over here with the Cape has done some things that you might be interested in. But yeah, right now we've released it to be just those permission levels. But looking for the use cases. I mean, that's the other thing is what's the case where you only want a specific page for a specific person within a larger notebook versus just having the sections be.
If I wanted to replace a wiki and I have multiple tiered employees, so I have full-time staff and then I have student employees, and I want my full-time staff to have access to certain information and the student employees.
So basically you're talking about 3 levels of permissions versus just the 2.
Correct.
Okay. No, it's an interesting use case, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So you mentioned these staff. I'm not in Office 365, and I'm assuming these features are only available there. That's, I guess, my quick first question.
Right now, yes.
And then my second question is just the staff notebooks and all those they have specific use cases in mind, right?
For education, in this
For
case,
education.
Yeah.
And those are available to anyone who has Office 365.
Correct. You could be using the staff notebook for education for your enterprise as well.
Okay.
So, but what we're doing right now is actually gathering feedback on what are the use cases for enterprises, and Ignite is a great, venue for that, where we've been asking people, hey, if you're using OneNote in your enterprise right now, what are the things that you would put in a staff notebook instead of, parent communication, lesson plan development, classroom observations?
So do you have any of those in mind right now? Obviously, staff notebook is
staff meetings.
Education.
I mean, projects.
Okay. Got it.
You got, what did you say? Proposals, yeah. I mean, there's a ton of use cases that just vary by vertical or role. That's the other thing we're thinking. Would you do something like the staff notebook for salespeople or for lawyers? Actually, legal is a great use case. We have a bunch of lawyers that I visited when I was in the UK who are using basically staff notebooks for their different cases and clients and all that. So.
Cool. Awesome. Thank you.
I have 3 questions.
Sure.
One, we're not one-to-one with our students, so a lot of times they'll either go into the library or they have a rolling cart with iPads. Is there any issue with more than one student using a device, or as long as it's in the cloud, they're good to go?
Well, actually, no issues at all. And actually, let me just switch over here because I was going to show. I didn't really show this as well, but on an iPad, I mean, the experience for OneNote is great. And a student could just open up a OneNote class notebook. This could be a shared iPad. It's just important that they would sign in to that iPad. So they would sign in, sign out, versus, just having them just jump into the app. You know, so they just have to know
into the iPad itself.
Into the iPad, right?
Okay.
So then it would pull all of their recent notebooks. So if you go here, you can see all the notebooks for that student. And the same thing if they just have, you know, a browser, like I showed you with when we opened up the class notebook. So you could have the students in the lab opening up their notebooks just in a browser session.
Okay.
So don't need to have a one-to-one environment. And we've seen some pretty amazing things in non-one-to-one environments. I think you say one-to-one is like the pie in the sky. You hope you have it, and it's amazing things like at St. Thomas and Sammamish, but you can definitely do some cool things without it.
Okay, second question is, once a teacher, or in this case, Campus Tech, gets a notebook created for a teacher, so elementary school, is there a way to make that a template to copy it across for a bunch of other teachers without the students' names in it, of course? Or a high school, so one teacher, she teaches the same thing in several different classrooms, kind of the same idea as the elementary school. So one teacher for several
You basically have
different
a master copy that you're drawing on.
Correct.
Yeah. And so actually we have a number of schools who have done this just with a shared notebook. So they have a shared notebook, like regular shared notebook, between all of their teachers. And so what they do, and it could be a staff notebook in the collaboration space as well, and then what they do is they just bring over that content kind of manually, which isn't great. So one of the things that we're thinking about is how do you have like a master copy that pre-populates into those individual class notebooks.
The idea you were talking about, copy
Yeah, some of the get a copy stuff, but also even more manual, more automatic if you just had, you know, a place that was kind of the master curriculum, and then it would push to all the other class notebooks. We don't have that feature yet, but I've been hearing a lot of feedback on that.
Okay, so right now...
Right now, you basically have to create a shared notebook between, you know, whoever is going to need to access it, and then what they could do is drag over the content from that library into the... Keep it in sections. Keep it in sections, yeah. It's a great... What was that? It's a whole file on its own that can be copied in. Right, that's a great point. So actually, if you have the pages that you want to share within a section, then that whole section can just be copied over to that the new class notebook that you have.
Okay.
So you could have one for what's an example, Daryl? Like
well, often when you're going through creating the class notebook and you've got those sections that you create for each of your students, you create them based on the modules you're going to be covering in class. So if they reflect the modules of your curriculum, then they're going to match what's in your own content area of your notebook. Students will have an area they can do their work on forces in motion, and you've got that same area as well. So if you follow that pattern, it's really good. You can take a whole module, it's a whole file, and there you go. There's 12 that you cover in a year.
So mainly like the tabs across the top?
Yeah, the tabs are the sections.
Okay. Okay. And then one more. One of our campus techs said he highlighted, and kind of like you did today, the students' names, throws them in, says, go create. He can see the student's name on the left, but then it just never appears in the student's side. The student never sees the OneNote. So finally he just goes and removes that student out of there, adds him manually by one, and then eventually it gets in there. Is there a time delay, or is there an issue that...
It might be, I mean, it may be an identity issue with Office 365 where they're it's trying to pull it from Active Directory and it's not resolving. But you said it did show up after a while.
When he pulled it out and completely got rid of it and then just added it in individually.
When you say individually, do you mean
like
not as part of the...
A student's ID just, okay, I need to add one more student to this list, so he adds that one student.
Well, I would make sure that it's resolving, because one of the things that you notice, it actually like underlines the name. It may be that it wasn't resolving, it wasn't pulling it from Active Directory.
Hadn't quite resolved yet.
Yeah, and that's why it's, he wasn't added, was because that particular name didn't resolve as part of the longer list. But that's one of the reasons why we want groups. I mean, if you have groups, then it's just, you have your Math 201 class list.
Exactly.
You put that in the blank instead of all the names, and even you have the scenario of a student leaves a class and another student comes in, that group is updated, and then this class notebook is updated, and there's all these scenarios that it could open up that, right now we don't have.
So do you have anybody who is Active Directory pulling in their stuff or eSchool Plus and making groups yet?
Not yet, but we're working with the groups.
Automated kind of thing?
We're trying to make that possible with the groups guys, yeah.
Thank you.
Any other questions? One back there, yeah.
Yeah, two quick questions.
Sure.
What if our students are in a separate Active Directory domain from the faculty, so I can't, if I go to send a mail message, I can't look up student names. The global address catalog isn't synchronized. So if I type in and everybody's on Office 365, if I type in their full email address, will that allow them to participate?
If they're in different...
It's like I'm at scf.edu and it's student.scf.edu. So it's a subdomain. I'm not sure the back end whether it's a separate or if they just got it that way.
Yeah, it probably wouldn't resolve in that case between the two. So you have to sync them up, I believe. That's a great question for the deployment guy.
Yeah, because we've got 100,000 students over. We brought in all the alumni and all that stuff. It's a college level, so.
Yeah, and I've had that question before. I think it takes a little bit of understanding what your setup is to understand what we need to do to sync it all up.
Okay, maybe I'll ask that at the booth.
Yeah, at the booth or at that session.
Okay, and then the second question, is there any thoughts of bringing in Microsoft official academic courseware and any form of integration? I teach server classes. We also have SQL classes and all that, and we use the MOAC software, that's provided by Microsoft.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we have talked to those guys a little bit about integration. I think the new APIs will open up a lot. We're working on, working with them to make that possible. I have a timeline exactly on when that would be, but we definitely have heard that feedback of, how do we make OneNote the place for, note taking and completing of. Is basically completing of all the assignments.
Yeah, they've got labs that they complete and all that stuff. So,
yep.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yep.